Hey guys, what's going on? It is Will Caban, the Mortgage Man. So I hope everybody is having an awesome morning. And I just wanted to get started and talk about how COVID-19 has impacted the mortgage verification um, process. Now, essentially, some of you may or may not have been affected by this. I know uh, if you talk to somebody in your circle, there's probably somebody who's been affected in some sort of way. I know personally, I've had a few clients who've been in the restaurant business, the hotel business, and just the overall services business, and they've been affected. So unfortunately, things have had to happen where we've had to delay certain things with their mortgage and their purchase. So with that being said, what I wanted to do is just go through this today so that everyone has a clear idea and a clear understanding of what your options are and how to approach the verification process if you're ever in a position that this comes up. So essentially, what is a mortgage verification of employment? Verification of employment obviously is a verification for your client's employment. If they're self-employed, there's a different mechanism, a different way to actually employ that, to actually do this, the employment verification. But essentially, the employment process is pretty standard, right? We take a written verification of employment or we do a verbal verification of employment. And in some cases, there's alternatives to those too. Now, a VOE happens traditionally in the beginning stages and again at the end of the actual loan process. And this is where dynamically a lot of people get confused, because in the beginning stages, we usually will ask for verification of employment for a number of different reasons. First, because we clearly want to make sure that you're employed. We want to know the amount of time that you're employed. We want to make sure that your earnings that you're receiving are in fact in line with the earnings that you received previously. And if you have any differentials like overtime, bonus, commission, etc., we need your employer to break that down. So in addition to that, when you have your written verification of employment, you want to know what your acceptable alternatives to a traditional VOE are. Now, in addition to a traditional written verification of employment, you can actually, in some cases, not have to have a verification of employment filled out in the beginning. Why? Because we may be able to pull it from a electronic source like the work number or some other electronic source that your employer uses. And if we can get that and the information is accurate, in most cases, we can use that information. Now, if you do happen to get a waiver, right? So I get a question, what if I didn't need a VOE when I started the loan process? Do I still need to do one at the end of the loan process? And this is it's a really good question. And the reason why is because when it comes to the actual VOE process, you're definitely going to still need to get some sort of verification towards the end, especially with COVID-19 and changes that they've made. You're going to need, and we're going to need to know what kind of employment you still have, if you're still employed, if everything is still the same, because not only are we facing clients being furloughed, being temporarily relieved of their employment, or being let go of their jobs altogether, we're seeing clients that get a reduction in pay, right? So if we have really close DTI and we're looking at a client who's taking a significant reduction in their pay, then we might be in a position where we have where we basically have to reevaluate what their overall scenario is. So essentially, these are some of the things that we have to look at. So we will need the process, and we will need to get a VOE for your employment. Now, what updated VOE changes have been made due to COVID-19? I get that question all the time, and this is where realtors need to be aware of what's happening, because it is affecting clients and it will continue to affect clients until COVID-19 is taken care of. So here's the primary differences. Now, this may vary with different investors, but not so much. The overall consensus is that investors are trying to protect their interest with the loans that they have to sell in the secondary market. And the way that they have to do that, and the only way that they can really do that, is by being in a position to have enhanced due diligence. And you see this across the board. It's not just with verification of employment. You see it with other aspects of the entire mortgage process as well. But today I'm specifically talking about verification of employment. So what they're going to do, an initial verification of employment later in the process, at least 7 days before the note date. The note date is the close date, right? This is to make sure that you're still employed, to make sure that you're still making the same income, to make sure that there's no issues with your employment, your employer, no temporary closings, etc. The second verification of employment is going to happen 1 business day prior to funding, right? So a lot of people have griped about this because, man, we verified 7 days before closing. Now we're verifying again 1 day before funding authorization. Yes, we are. And most lenders, if not all lenders, are in the same position, and funding authorization is required for all loans. So when you look at that and you put that in perspective, this is not to penalize anybody. Again, this is to make sure that we're being prudent, and lenders in general are being prudent in their lending and the way that they're doing these things. So if you're a realtor, you're an agent, you're a client, you're somebody who's watching this who has some sort of process going on, I don't care if it's a purchase, if it's a refinance, or something regards to the real estate transaction. Even if you're looking out and you're in the pre-approval stages, if you know something has happened with your employer and your employment, you've gotten a reduction in pay, you've gotten a temporary leave, you lost your job, then you need to go talk to your loan officer, mainly because of the fact that you guys need to strategize on what your possibilities are and what the options are, which leads me to my next question, which is what happens if my employer is temporarily closed due to COVID, right? I have a lot of clients in the restaurant business. I live in Miami, so being in Miami, we have a lot of restaurants, hotels, and those kind of services. And a lot of my clients are affected directly by that. And to be quite honest with you, if you're in any of those businesses that has been temporarily closed, and you're in the mortgage process, right? Meaning that you're in contract to close, then what's going to most likely end up happening is you're going to have to either stop the entire process, or you're going to have to push your closing date back pretty much to a point where it coincides with you being able to be back at work. And I know that doesn't give much solace, but the truth is that's the way it's going right now. And the reason why it's going like that is because if your employer's temporarily closed, the logic behind that is that you're not making income. You're probably receiving unemployment or some sort of supplemental income that is not directly related or even in par with what your income was before. So with that being said, your best bet is to push the closing date back. And of course, what happens if I lose my job while in the mortgage process, or even in the pre-approval process, or the home search process? There's two ways to approach this. If you're in the mortgage process and you lost your job and you don't have another job lined up, then unfortunately, you're most likely going to end up having to either push the close back to give yourself a little bit of time to find a new employer, or we're going to have to completely cancel the contract entirely. Now, with that being said, if you do, depending on what line of work you're in, if you do find a new employer and you have a salary and you have projected earnings, then you could be in a position where we can use that as long as it coincides with a certain period and a certain date of the note date. So it's not like it's impossible. If you do lose your job and then you find another job and you have to wait X number of time in order to have that, it really just depends on how long that gap of employment might be. And if it's not that long, then you would be in a position where we can essentially use projected income. So with all that being said, today I really appreciate everyone who's joined, everyone who's watched. I wanted to jump on, just talk about verification of employment, what it means to you, as a client, what it means to you as a realtor, some of the things that you should be aware of, some of the things that you need to kind of speak to your clients about. if you're aware of any of these circumstances and situations that happen, then definitely try to strategize with the loan officer. Doesn't mean that you can't get financed. It just means that you probably have to plan a little bit differently in order to make sure that you can make it happen. So with that being said, guys, I really appreciate everything. I really appreciate you joining. Actually, Eva just asked, what difference have you seen in levels of applications? That's a great question. So the level of applications have actually, believe it or not, it's actually kind of increased. Yeah, when we look at it from a team perspective, we've actually had increases in applications. Now, applications are dually your purchase business, and then you also have your refinance business. And in the last couple of weeks, we've been more purchase based than we've been refinance. So we haven't really had a spike in the refinance business. That may change in the coming weeks, but we've had a steady, consistent flow of our purchase business. So that right there, to be very honest with you, has really been, and I'll tell you the reason behind that. The reason why we've seen an increase in the applications is twofold. First, there are buyers that are still out there that are looking for properties. We are doing things a little bit differently, and I'm going to do a webinar about this later this week or the beginning of next week with a few guests on virtual touring and virtual open houses, and how agents in general can kind of utilize and strategize with certain things in order to still continue to give that high level of service to their clients. So that aspect of it, the virtual aspect of it, has been, very well received by buyers, mainly because buyers, especially first-time home buyers, are more keen to technology. They're more keen to see things like this, do Zoom conference calls, etc. So we have seen an uptick in applications, essentially. And I feel like in the next couple of weeks, depending on where the market goes, they might level out, right? But the truth is that even if it does level out in the next, I would say, 2, 3, 4 weeks after everything is kind of settled, we would be in a position where you're gonna see a surge of people jump back into the market. So another question from Eva, are those locals or relocation to the area? So it's a mix. I work predominantly with predominantly first-time home buyers. And I got to tell you, with my pool I have about 22 applications in right now, and I have about four of the clients who are actually relocating, and I have another 2 that are purchasing from out of state, right? Not investment properties, but they're buying second homes. So when you look at the local and the relocation, the mix is probably like 25-75, but people are still very much interested in the Miami market because of what we have to offer. I mean, we have sun, we have beach, we have beautiful weather. We have that all year round. So it's still a very attractive market, but from a local perspective, locals are always, in my opinion, going to dominate. And we still have locals that are very, very much in tune to what the market's doing. They understand that the sellers that are out there right now are very motivated, and they're serious about going out there and making offers. So guys, in closing, I really do appreciate you making the time today to join me on this live. I'm going to try to make this more of a consistent theme. If there's anything that you want to talk about, you can always hit me in the comments. You can always send me a private message, and I'll try to work on some content for you guys throughout the week. Thanks, and take care.